And we're live. Hello. Welcome to Reasoned Live. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you tonight. As ever, I'm joined by Alex Armstrong. And no, Chloe Dobbs has not been away for such a long time that she has quite the almighty tan. This is Younes Sadaghiani. But Chloe Dobbs is still away, as you might have guessed. And we wish her well. She's not dead. I don't know why I said that as if she was. She is doing something very exciting though, and I can't tell you any more about it. But yes, I'm sorry. I'm getting feedback of myself, and Sarah says, by the way, on YouTube, that we are always late, and I couldn't agree with her more. It's not even fashionably late.
Darren.
It's just rude. It's not me. It's not me.
Darren. It's always Darren. It's just, got a lot of work to do there.
It's terrible. You're terrible. Younes, you've been sort of going viral recently, right?
Yeah, I mean, I produce a video every day. I wouldn't say super viral, but they're getting good traction. I consider viral more than 1 million views. It's not quite at that level, but
All
yeah,
right.
But I mean, you're quite viral on Twitter. Like I see your posts. You got a lot of followers and you get good traction, Darren.
Yeah, it's not bad on there. It's not bad on there. I'm just gonna sort of let people load up. Lots of people on YouTube, some on Twitter. Now, I mean, Alex, you've just been on GB News as well. I wonder if could you not have plugged it on there for all of 2 minutes that you were on?
It was so bad. It was so annoying, right? Because I was gearing up to have a fight with that woman Stella from an ex-Labour advisor because she was defending
the Greek woman.
Yeah, she was defending the milkshake being thrown over Nigel Farage.
Oh
and I was
my
like,
God.
This is in the 1990s, and she was defending it, which is bizarre, But then because she was talking about a woman who is currently under investigation, GB News decided to pull the broadcast, halfway through the debate, which was really disappointing because she was getting absolutely slaughtered by me. If I do say so myself. But that's what happens on live TV. If you break the rules and we've got Ofcom to contend with, then you end up having to cut the broadcast short.
Yeah,
Shame.
well, I mean, that's not even Ofcom, to be fair. That's an issue around contempt of court, I guess.
Well,
but anyway,
point, yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
the girl that actually threw the milkshake is an OnlyFans model.
Yes, I did see that. Yes.
Yeah. I think she just done it, to be honest with you. I don't even think it was a political thing. I think she just wanted to get famous.
Oh, I agree. I think she's done it because apparently she's had an uptick in OnlyFans subscriptions.
Yeah,
of course she has. But she is a Corbynite. She's been. If you go back on her social media post, she's a massive Corbynite. She's massively pro Hamas, I think, from what I've been seeing online. So it wouldn't surprise me if she just saw the opportunity. One, she's politically against Nigel. Two, she can upgrade her business model. So there we go.
Yeah. No, I agree. And now, well, yeah, she did post, didn't she, saying that she was going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. She did it as that, and now she can be the sort of lefty. And I think actually a lot of viewers will be aware who Mrs. Slocum is. And Mrs. Slocum was a woman who was always on the hunt. She was in a programme called Are You Being Served, which is a programme that was on in, I believe, the 1970s, but viewers will correct me if I'm wrong. And Mrs. Slocum was always on the hunt for her pussy. She always used to say, "I've lost my pussy. Has anybody seen my pussy?" And I dare say yesterday, Twitter found its pussy. So that woman will be making lots of money as a consequence. But yes, I think actually it was a terrible thing that happened.
Yes,
and,
but I think it's the same thing because there was this woman on Piers Morgan show. I don't know if you saw it. And then there was like a portal from Dublin to New York. There was a camera in middle of Dublin and New York where there was like a
and
massive
she flashed
screen.
her breasts.
And then she flashed herself and then she made like 100K in a week. And I was like, wow.
What, on OnlyFans?
Crazy. Yeah. She was OnlyFans model. Wow. Shameless.
The world is not as we know it, is it?
I mean, I'm on OnlyFans, but I've got to pay them.
Darren, there's already clips of you saying you've lost your pussy. Now we're talking.
No,
Be careful
Mrs.
what you want to get clipped up, Darren.
Mrs. Slocum's pussy. Everyone knows who Mrs. Slocum's pussy is. On the YouTube, they're all laughing at that. So they're having a good laugh at Mrs. Slocum's pussy. Now, someone on YouTube, Time Lord, says her milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, and they're like, "Damn right, it's better than yours." Yes, I imagine it's more than her milkshake, Time Lord. But Nigel's milkshake did bring all the people to the yard in Clacton yesterday, where he's standing as an MP, and it was very nice to see. Actually, I really liked it. I think I'm hearing Alex, are you hearing a little bit of feedback, like a little bit of a tinny sort of?
No.
I wonder if it's Younes is not having headphones in. I can hear myself.
The problem is, I think I need to invest on a good mic for myself, because my headphones actually reduce the quality of the sound. So it's better for me just to talk to my phone.
Okay.
Trust me, because the headphones bring the.
Well, we need to get
podcast.
For the next live stream, wherever the professionals, but for the next live stream, we'll get you a microphone and headphones sorted. But viewers, if you notice any feedback, let me know. It's not just me going insane, because that's plausible, as you well know. Now, right, I want to start with some important story, an important story, first of all, before we get into what will be quite a Nigel Farage heavy show. YouTube, we're getting lots of Farage comments through on YouTube already, actually. But Carol says perfect for me, so it is me just going insane. The audio's perfectly fine. Anyway, right. I want to play this lovely clip of this man who really touched me earlier.
Our freedom, and that's the word, freedom.
Look out!
We had it back again. That's a short Sunderland, isn't it?
That's pretty good side, isn't it?
Good, Dan. I couldn't ask for no more than that, could you? No, and he's probably enjoying his trip, thinking they're waving back. No, but that's wonderful.
So that gentleman there, obviously a D-Day veteran, and today there was commemorations with His Majesty the King leading the commemorations, and ahead of tomorrow. Now, His Majesty the King won't be attending tomorrow because he's been advised by his doctors with his cancer diagnosis not to do so. And I think it's so important that we do commemorate this, despite the King's absence, because, men like that, the sacrifice that they gave in order for us to be free is something incredibly important, and 80 years on, worth commemorating. But rather depressingly, a recent poll it was the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, that actually found that more than half, so that's more than 50% of those aged between 18 and 34, so that's my age group, that's all of our age groups as far as I'm aware. Yes, Younes, you're nodding your head, so yes. And they said, that poll found that polling basically asked the question, do you know what D-Day is? And the 18 to 34-year-olds turned around and said no. Now, this isn't, in my opinion, just a minor historical oversight. This isn't going back to 1066 and saying you don't know what happened at the Battle of Hastings, right? This is a glaring neon red flag of our collective failure, I think, to actually pass down those stories of, like we see on screen there, the stories of courage, of sacrifice, and actually the sheer grit of people like John Bennett to actually go out there and create the free world that we live in today. We take that for granted. And if young people don't know their own history, they don't know the history of their ancestors, then how can they possibly feel that has shaped their present? Is it any wonder, right, that we have such a hard left mentality seeping through that generation that says that what we are is shaped by centuries and centuries, thousands of years actually, of English men and women, British men and women actually shaping who we are, the freedoms that we all take for granted in this country and actually in much of the Western world as well. So I'm really depressed by these findings, and the Telegraph reported them a couple of weeks ago, but I just want to highlight them today because I think that this is going to be the last time, right, that we see men like John Bennett that we've just seen there actually at these commemorations, because this is 80 years on. These are veterans who have been around a really long time now, who will sadly pass away. And I think actually we ought to be deeply ashamed of ourselves that our next generation do not know anything about what those people went through. But Younes, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a failure of the education system. And it's funny because now all the students talk about slave trade and they will talk about this woke ideology. That's all they know about. They don't actually know about what D-Day is. And I saw another study, and this really shocked me. American students, college students, they couldn't find America on a map, some of them. And I was thinking, really? And again, it's just the institutionalized failure of the education system. They are pushing the wrong narratives. They are pushing this woke lefty ideology. You know, there was another interview where they asked someone, "Oh, what do you know about George Washington?" And the first thing the student said, "Oh, he was a slave trader." Okay, well, do you know anything else about him other than him being a slave trader? So yeah, it's just a failure, and I feel like we're just getting dumber. It's weird for me because in an age of information with social media, where we have all the information in the world at our fingertips, I just don't understand how we're getting more stupid. It's shocking for me, and I feel like maybe there is like a whole formula to it, from our diet to our societies to the mainstream media to social media to our education system. I just don't think there's one reason for it.
Alex, they say the same about Winston Churchill, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a constant attack on our culture. This is what's been going on now for the last decade or more. Tories, again, Conservative Party haven't helped this because they haven't done enough to stop it.
Oh, they've done sod all.
They've done so, yeah, exactly. D-Day is taught at schools. It's taught actually quite a lot. Just to be clear, because I don't want that to be, that is true. It's taught a lot, but it's the context in which it's taught in that is a bother to me. And the teachers that are putting the agenda forward to make this seem some sort of loss to the world, that we defeated the Nazis, that this was some sort of attempt of American imperialism over Britain. And of course, during that period of time, we still had our empire, which they constantly referred to in negative connotations, despite that empire doing so much good for the world. This is the attack that we constantly are experiencing. I know all reasoned viewers will sympathise that they've seen their, pictures of Winston Churchill's statue being boarded up because they can't be trusted. The protesters can't be trusted to not deface it and calling him a Nazi, which is absolute bonkers, crazy stuff. So, I worry. I really, really worry. But you know what the reassuring thing is? Just to end that on a positive, not my bit on a positive note here, is that the right are making a comeback. And if you look at Nigel Farage amongst the younger generation, we're talking the 18-year-old sort of, that's
TikTok,
sort of 4 years. The TikTok generation. They love him. He's become the most popular politician in British TikTok overnight. It's similar to Trump on TikTok as well. And so I think we will start to see a reversal of this anti-British culture as the younger generation find it more and more attractive.
Yeah, I think you could be onto something there. I mean, I severely hope you're right. Otherwise, we're all going to be in the gulag.
Yeah.
Recent life will be from the gulag. Steve there on YouTube says the schools are too busy indoctrinating the children with negative aspects of our history. And I think that's absolutely right. But it's a good point that Younes made, actually, that actually the sheer scale of information that you have at your fingertips, they're all scrolling through these TikTok feeds, but they're not actually using this wealth of knowledge that's at their fingertips. The King put it like this. The King today said that actually, poignantly, I think it was, he said it wasn't a privilege to hear the testimonies of those who served. He said it's our duty to hear the testimonies of those who served, right? He said our role mustn't be a passive one. We have to ensure that future generations do not forget the blood, sweat and tears shed to actually replace tyranny, Nazi tyranny, with freedom. genuine tyranny, not these myths about Sir Winston Churchill. Actual tyranny, horror, Jews being put into gas chambers, all of these horrible events that took place. So, yeah, Alex, were you about to say something there?
I was. It was that word, fascism, and that's been bounded around a lot for politicians like Nigel Farage. You see it online every day, people calling him a fascist. What they don't realise, people like Nigel Farage are the first sort of politicians that would have stood up to the Nazis in the 1940s. He'd be one of those people leading the way for that. And for the left to call Nigel Farage a fascist and then love the idea of him being sort of assaulted, even if it was by a milkshake, it could have been so much worse. They love that idea. They laugh at it. That's fascist tactics. That's using some form of violence to stop someone like Nigel Farage getting out and talking to people to try and dismay him so much and dishearten him so much that he stands behind a glass barrier like they do in America. That's the kind of fascist tactics we're talking about. So I do love the double standards of the left sometimes because it's so easily exposed. But it just reminded me of that all of a sudden, Darren.
Our good friend AD on Twitter says that it's the same in the United States of America. And AD is talking about the fact that young people they have this rebellious streak, as youth often does, of course. And that rebellious streak is going against the mainstream. Now, the mainstream, of course, the dominant culture is this pervasive left-wing ideology, this left liberalism. And AD is actually saying that Vivek Ramaswamy's town hall meetings showed the uptake of young people and the support by the TikTok generation for Vivek and the politics that he espouses. So I think that that's probably a really good and salient point, that actually we just have to be making the case that actually we are here. These are what the ideas we believe in. And Nigel, of course, is doing a great job at doing all of that. But before anyone wants to chop in about Nigel Farage, we are going to talk about Nigel Farage. I promise. Yeah. AD says, I am 100% correct. AD, you can come again. Your £5 is in the post. Now, yes, I want to talk about this extraordinary clip because I don't know if any viewers watched the debate that ITV had with Julie Etchingham chairing it yesterday. And Julie was going through all of these questions at sort of breakneck speed. We need to talk about this topic, that topic. It wasn't a recent live stream where we allow people to actually have opinions and form them. It was wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It was absurd. But anyway, one thing that stuck out to me, and it caused lots of memes on the internet, and I'm a big meme fan, but it caused lots of memes, and I thought it was hilarious. But this is what Sir Keir Starmer had to say on healthcare yesterday, and I just want to sort of dissect it for a moment, because I did find it truly extraordinary.
A quick point of information to both of you. If you had loved ones on a long waiting list for surgery, would you, if you felt that that was the only way forward, use private healthcare? Rishi Sunak?
Yes.
Keir Starmer?
No.
Absolutely no, if your loved one was on a waiting list for surgery?
No.
Thank you very much.
I don't use private health.
Okay.
I use the NHS. That's where my wife works, in one of the big hospitals. As I say, it runs through my DNA.
OK, thank you.
He can't even talk. Like, that's the thing. I watched that debate yesterday. He can't even talk. He's not a leader. He doesn't have any charisma. But yeah, sorry.
No, he failed. He definitely lost that debate. And, the polls suggest that actually Rishi Sunak wiped the floor with him. But actually, I was really struck by this because it goes to the very heart of a point that Douglas Murray made in The Telegraph today, where he said, Britain will soon discover to its horror that there is no such thing as a moderate left. He says this election could unleash a Labour government far more dangerous and extreme than many seem to realise. Now, the reason I mentioned that Douglas Murray article in the context of this Sir Keir Starmer healthcare question is because I think this unveils the very pernicious ideology and the hardened ideology that's behind everything that Sir Keir Starmer is driven by. And it's an ideology that says that even if my family are on death's door, even if, my mother needs a hip operation, even if my wife needs, some form of private healthcare that we can't get on the NHS, I will refuse to ever countenance using private healthcare because I am so wedded to leftist Marxist ideology that I will refuse anything to do with the private sector. And is he, let's not forget that he's attacking private schools. He wants to shut down school choice, and he's doing it in a very covert, backhanded way, but he's doing it nonetheless. And I think that this is all part of a leftist agenda to actually enlarge in the state, to reduce the size of the people, enlarge in the state, enlarge in the power of the government, and to actually make the citizen even smaller. And I find that deeply troubling, deeply scary. And I think it says a lot about the man that he wouldn't countenance actually going through private healthcare if his family and he were at death's door. It says a lot about a man, doesn't it, Younes?
So, can I just say something quickly? I don't believe a word he's saying. I think he's just virtue signaling. I really don't believe him because, first of all, he's a multimillionaire and he tries to pander to this Marxist left-wing ideology. But I just don't believe him. I just feel like when I watch him and I analyze people a lot and I analyze their body language, I just felt like every time he answered the question, he had to think about the question and he was trying to be diplomatic and he was like almost thinking like, what do the Labour supporter wants to hear? Because when someone's truthful, the word comes out naturally, And I just think he says things just to virtue signal. And I just think he's just a career politician. And I think he's a dying breed because people see through these kind of people. And that's why Nigel Farage is an attractive alternative because no matter what you think of Nigel Farage, and I personally love him, he's charismatic and you can tell he says what he means. And he means what he says. I don't get the same feeling from Keir Starmer. And neither do I from Rishi Sunak. And that's why these two characters are so unpopular because they belong to the old breed of, neoliberal 90s, like all through the teleprompter. And that's one of the reasons people are actually attracted to Trump. Because Trump is also, he says what he means and he means what he says and he's charismatic. Whereas these people, every time you ask them a question, they have to think a few seconds and you can just tell they're lying. I guarantee you, if he had a cancer and if he had to wait 2 years to get treatment, he will go to a private clinic. I guarantee you.
Alex Keith on Facebook says, imagine the outrage if he said he would use private healthcare. Now, of course, Rishi Sunak did say he would use private healthcare. And I think it doesn't take Sir Einstein to work out that actually Rishi Sunak does have access to private healthcare. But many people do. The NHS model is on its knees, right? Many people are taking up private healthcare if they don't already have it. Is there anything so inherently wrong with saying that you would treat your family in private healthcare? Is it not reducing the burden on the NHS?
Of course, there's nothing wrong with saying that. One of Reform's key policies is to say if one of your loved ones is suffering too long on the wait list and we can't get it down, we'll give you vouchers for private healthcare. It's utilising the system we've built in this great country to its advantage, not its disadvantage. Now, should it be the best option? No, it should be something that people use if they can afford to pay for it. I don't think it's a substitute for the NHS. But the problem we have, and this is what neither of Rishi Sunak nor Keir Starmer brought up last night, is that the NHS is broken deeply in the system, the administration of it. So rather than them going, well, would you use it if someone was dying? Obviously the human answer, and if you're not a robot like Keir Starmer, the human answer would be, of course, if my child or wife was dying or a family member was dying and I could pay for private healthcare, I would do it, right? Any human being can argue that that is a very easy answer. You're only appeasing zealots, these socialist zealots, on the other hand. But frankly, these are very sensible policies Reform have put forward, but the NHS needs to be completely uphealed and started again because it is broken beyond repair. When we're paying diversity and inclusion managers 100k a year to sit there and cherry pick whether you can work as a doctor because you're not black enough or gay enough or whatever or trans enough, then we've got a problem.
Yeah, MJS on YouTube says it's like Diane Abbott being so left-wing, she sent her kids to private school, which, is another good point.
Exactly,
and BTC says, don't forget Keir Starmer had a scholarship at a private school, and like most private schools, they offer this due to their charitable status. So, the left are just hypocrites, Younes, aren't they?
Yeah, they are absolute hypocrites. And can I just say something about the NHS? The NHS, as Alex said, is broken. You have to wait weeks before you get a normal appointment. I know people personally that have been waiting years to get surgery, years. And every time their surgery day comes up, the NHS cancels. And oh, sorry, we can't do it today. They have to wait another 6 months, and then again and then again and again. And to the point, I actually have some of my friends. They're like, we're not going to wait for this, and it might be too expensive. So it might be actually cheaper for us to travel to Turkey or to Iran and to pay the doctors there to do it for us, you know? But of course, look, NHS was good once upon a time. I personally had 2 different surgeries under the NHS. And this was, way back like 10 years ago, okay? So we need the NHS, and it's a great idea because, healthcare can't be a privilege or a luxury. Everyone should have access to healthcare. However, we have to admit that private healthcare is better. And if you can afford it, and if you can see your doctor within an hour of calling him, and if you can afford it and you can do it and you need a surgery, whatever, of course you're going to go to private healthcare, And the NHS, as I said, is broken down. We need a lot more funding. And as you said, there is this whole inclusion. We need doctors, we need nurses, we need to pay them higher. And the whole thing just looks like to me is collapsing. The NHS is collapsing. It's not like what it used to be, so it doesn't serve the purpose. It doesn't serve the purpose anymore. So of course we need private healthcare.
Michelle on YouTube says it's the National Health Service, not the International Health Service. We need to stop people coming to this country just to use the NHS, for example. Because you can walk in, no questions asked, right? If you get into Britain, you could walk into the NHS and you don't have to, obviously there's no card machine in the NHS, but I think there bloody well should be, to be honest.
Well, people fly over here from foreign countries when they're deeply pregnant, like about to drop, so they can have their child on the NHS and have that bed there for them and the best service in the world for free. That still happens today. We don't talk about it much anymore, but it still happens today. And that child, guess what, is then a British citizen as well, which then gives you asylum rights in the UK. It's absolutely insane the amount of loopholes that are in our system that haven't been closed for whatever deliberate reason.
So in the Douglas Murray piece where he says Britain will soon discover to its horror that there is no such thing as a moderate left, with Angela Rayner as our Deputy Prime Minister and Sir Keir Starmer obviously as Prime Minister. And he concludes actually that there are signs of what our country will soon be, one led by people that believe in the outsourcing of foreign and domestic policy, because I think Sir Keir Starmer yesterday made it absolutely clear that actually he wouldn't ever countenance taking us out of foreign courts, for example. And he wants us to be respected on the world stage, and that means he wants to be respected around liberal government leaders' dining tables and these non-governmental NGOs and unaccountable institutions. And he says turning the UK into some medium-sized non-governmental organisation. He says what an indictment it is of the current government that this wholly inadequate B team should be regarded as so vastly preferential to them. And I think that's a really important point, actually. How bad must the Conservative Party be to actually make these people that want to outsource governance, basically, to align ourselves so close to the EU that we may as well be up Ursula von der Leyen's arse? And I find it a dereliction of duty for the Conservative Party to have been so weak and so inadequate in actually defending all of these things that we hold so dear. They've done nothing about them.
Exactly.
Younes?
And and we have, Keir Starmer, a virtue signaling neoliberal that will probably end up taking us back to the EU. And as you said, but I just think that's a dying breed of politician. I just don't think anyone buys these people anymore. And the only reason the Labour's going to win the next general election is not because people like Keir Starmer, it's because the consecutive failure of the Conservative Party. And when you're in power for 14 years and you don't do much and you actually become an embarrassment over time, then of course your opposition is going to win. And I just see really dark days ahead if Labour wins. I feel like the economy is going to collapse. I feel like we're going to have this globalist agenda, as you said. We're going to have a rise in wokeism, a rise in virtue signaling, a rise in Islamism. And Douglas Murray is right. I'm actually a big fan of his. I've got his book here, The War on the West. And that's exactly what's going to happen. The war on the West. And it's coming true when people like Keir Starmer become the next prime minister, because they're going to enhance and they're going to encourage this. And it's going to be the downfall of this.
Right, okay. I want to move on then from Sir Keir Starmer to talk about Tommy Robinson, which isn't a sentence I ever thought I would say. But on Saturday, whilst I was away, there was a rally, as you both know, and there was a rally where there was lots of coverage saying things like this, which I'm hoping you can see on screen right now, that says Tommy Robinson leads hundreds of football hooligans in London marched demanding Met Police Chief quits. And I thought, oh, I wonder, what did those hooligans look like? So I had a quick little butchers on social media to find out what these hooligans looked like. And I came across these people and I said, MSM, violent far-right football thugs spotted in London on Saturday. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Younes, but they don't exactly look like the sort of people that are going to take you in a back alley and have at you, right? These don't look like horrible hooligans to me. They actually look like patriots who are concerned about what's happening to their country.
Yeah, and anyone who supports Tommy Robinson is either a racist or a right-wing extremist. And these people are the ones that don't talk about Islamism. I actually was in contact with Tommy Robinson, and he actually invited me to the parade. I couldn't make it, unfortunately, because I was away on a business trip. But he has another one on the 27th of July, and I will make sure I'll make it to that one. And I was thinking about this the other day, and Tommy Robinson exposed the rape gangs in Luton,
Yeah.
and the mainstream media, like they are doing now, they went after him and basically took him to court, freezed his bank accounts, made his life hard, and they basically spent years trying to throw him in prison. And then all during that time, the rape gangs in Luton grew. So I'm like, why are you going after someone that's exposing the truth? You can have whatever opinion you want on Tommy Robinson, whether you think he's a racist or not. I'm not going to comment on that. However, when someone speaks the truth and he's right, you can't be vilifying him. And this is, again, the mainstream media. They try to vilify Nigel Farage. They try to vilify Tommy Robinson. They try to vilify Trump with all his indictments,
Yeah.
And I feel like the people are waking up to it. I really don't think people fall for this anymore. I really don't.
KF on YouTube says, I was one of those hooligans. I was there with my 73-year-old mum in her mobility scooter. Yes, I'm sure your mother was more pissed than a parrot, KF, and shouting, hurling abuse at people and all these other things that hooligans do. And Devon says, what, those hooligans in wheelchairs on crutches, those hooligans, yes, how terrible. Wild in the Woods says, I watched it. It was mostly the elderly and women. And then, yes, AD says on Twitter, 2 right-wing people arrested, 9 left-wing people arrested. Tells you everything you need to know. And Alex, this is the point, right? Week in, week out, every Saturday since October 7th, we have seen the most awful parts, dregs of society unleashed upon the streets of London, Manchester and elsewhere, who are called for violent intifada, who have called for jihad on the streets of Britain, who have said the state of Israel shouldn't exist, the world's only Jewish state. All of these things, they time and again, they have said politicians have blood on their hands for supporting Israel, for supporting actually Jews not being massacred, and all of these other things. And that's fine. But, you gather on the streets of London as a peaceful protest like this one, and that gets more of a press pushback than the hate marches that take place every weekend. It just shows that we have not got an even keel when it comes to the biased press.
Yeah, I mean, look, I put a tweet out the same day that I was actually at a D-Day event Saturday, Sunday, so I wasn't there either. But I put a tweet out going, I was looking at BBC News, Sky News, every single media channel looking for reports about the thousands of people showed up to that protest. Not a single article, not a single paper or media outlet reported on it. And that tells you something, doesn't it? They were waiting for something to kick off. They were waiting for violence. They were waiting for something to be said that they could report on. And of course, as soon as they did report it, they called them all football hooligans. Now, it just goes to show, doesn't it? It just goes to show how biased they are. I actually put underneath my tweet pictures of the BBC front page that had the thousands attend pro-Palestine rally. They did multiple times on their headlines. But as soon as there's a counter-protest to protect British culture and attack the 2-tier policing state we've built, they are utterly silent. To me, that screams agenda. It screams agenda over and over and over again. And
It
I don't know
does.
where it's coming from, but it to me,
Oh,
the fact
hope
that
not
every
hate.
media outlet was silent was, hope not hate.
Yeah,
Some of the biggest
that's who's
funders.
on screen right now. They posted the racist thugs plotting violence at today's Tommy Robinson demonstration. Well, the thugs
Things that
didn't do a very good job. Exactly. Yeah. These imaginary thugs, they didn't do very much. You know, all of these people here just saying they're here to show support for the nation state. This woman here, she doesn't exactly strike me as a hooligan. And you know,
Can I just say something though?
Of
Can I
course.
just quickly say something? Look, I just feel like we've become so divided. We have people like coming, and all power to these people, but we have them coming with a Union Jack, with a flag which I actually love a lot, and St. George's flag. Oh, there was an Iranian guy in between. You know, there is some Iranian flags there in between. If you go back a bit, him. That's one. That's the Iranian flag. So I actually saw
the old Iranian.
There it is.
Flag.
Yeah, there it is.
The old one.
So it just shows you that the Iranian community is actually very supportive. But at the same time, I feel like we've become so divided. We've become divided between Palestine and all these people asking for Sharia law. And we have people that come out, and they're mostly white, let's keep it real, and they, you know, defend the Union Jack and the St. George's. And I just feel like, where's the middle ground gone? Where's the middle ground gone? Like, okay, you can feel for the plight of the Palestinians. I feel sorry for the dead kids in Palestine. Okay, but I don't support Hamas, you know, and I don't, you know, call for the destruction of Israel, you know, and it's become very, and it's quite sad to see because this is happening all over the world, you know, everything's become so divided, and I hope in the near future we can all unite. But there's a counterweight. I understand what you're saying because, you know, we had a liberal wokey left and the marriage made in hell between Islamism and the woke left. And now we have the right-wing, more conservative people. So we are a counterweight to that. And I feel like with time, hopefully we can reach a middle ground because the way society is going, we're not really far from a civil war.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's a depressing point, but yes, there are lots of comments about actually hope not hate, and on the basically exposing them, right, and saying links to Labour and all these other things, which I think is correct. And Pete on Facebook says patriots, not anything of the opposite. And do you know what? Looking at all this footage, it's actually just nice to see the Union Jack. You know, it's nice to see the national flag at a protest in our capital city. You know, you don't see these at the hate marches. If you actually were to take a clip of the footage that you're seeing on screen right now, which, by the way, is by a guy called Harvey Walton on YouTube, Harvey Walton, and he's posted this footage, and it's beautiful footage. He's done a great job. But if you were to juxtapose, this footage with the footage of the hate marches, right, and the horrible nonsense that's spouted there, you would find that one was incredibly peaceful and the other was completely hateful and completely not tolerant and all the rest of it. This was, and despite that, it is vilified throughout the British press, and I find that really, really depressing and not given a fair hearing. I must say a shout out to my colleague at GB News, Michelle Dewberry, because I think actually she has given it a fair hearing on her show, and she has spoken out against much of and pushed back on much of the rhetoric around this, and I think that's right, and I'm glad that she did it. It's nice to see. I haven't been on there, so I haven't done it. But yes, Chunky Monkey on YouTube says Tommy Robinson was exposing two-tier policing. And I think that's correct. I think he actually did that. I think he did a good job on that. Any comments on this? Any final comments, boys?
No, I just like to say that this was possibly the most beautiful event I've seen in London for years, actually. Entirely peaceful. It demonstrated the best of Britain, best of British people from all cultures, actually. All cultures and races showed up there to counter-protest this absolute abhorrent scenes we see every Saturday. And I encourage more people to go. Hopefully this event, being so peaceful and so wonderful, encourages more people to go, do you know what, I'm going to go to that, because I do know there's a lot of hesitation because of the name that Tommy Robinson brings and the slandering he's received in the press. So a lot of people feel, I might lose my job if I go to that. But I hope after that demonstration on Saturday that people feel confident.
People say actually Bev
thing.
Turner did a good job as well. I just want to give her a shout out. I don't want to be unfair. Sorry, Younes.
One last thing is that I don't really understand what their end game is. Why is the mainstream media, such as BBC, trying to vilify these people? I really don't get it. And they try to support the pro-Palestinian movement, and they try to vilify these people. Isn't this country still 80% white anyway? And I just think that our institutions, such as the BBC and other mainstream media outlets, have been hijacked by these neo-Marxist, neoliberal people, where to the point that anything that is nationalist, they see it as a racist, but anything that's, it's like a globalist movement or it's like colored. I didn't even see people, like Black Lives Matter. They broke into buildings, they vandalized statues and everything. And the BBC wasn't saying anything. Even they went to the Churchill statue and they wrote, he was a racist. The guy that basically defeated the Nazis, the biggest, and if he didn't, we would have been living in a racist society. And the media wasn't covering even the Black Lives Matter movement, and these people were vandalizing and burning shops and vandalizing everything. And I just don't understand what is their motive here. Why is the mainstream media try to vilify patriots, but at the same time tries to protect the violent minorities?
Yeah, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican in America, she actually said, she was asked about how can you support convict Donald Trump, and she said, well, you all supported convict fucking George Floyd, and
I saw that.
It was very funny.
And there was a picture of them kneeling.
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
Anyway, right. Okay, let's get on to the meat of the topic I wanted to discuss today, which is, of course, Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Now, Reform UK have an exciting bit of news today. And this is coming from my good friends at Sly News. And Sly News say that Reform UK polls to within 2 points of the Tories in the latest YouGov poll. The exclusive survey for Sky News puts Labour on 40%, the Tories on 19%, and Reform on 17%. So very much chipping away at the Tory vote there, eating into it. And I imagine actually as well, taking away from some Labour votes as well. There will be, remember, lots of left-wing patriots who really like Nigel Farage, really agree with what he's done. But I was thinking about why this could be, right? And I saw these, and again, this is from Sly News, but I promise I'm not on the turn. I really don't like much of what Sky News are posting, but they have posted good stuff like this. And they posted this graphic, and I think it's a really important explainer on where we're at and how much we have been betrayed on immigration. So if you see here, from 2000, net migration starts to just veer off like you wouldn't believe. And that's, of course, under Tony Blair. And then under the Conservatives from 2020 onwards, once we'd actually taken back control, we have Brexit powers. We're able to actually dictate who can and cannot come into our country. The Tories decide actually what we really want to do, and what the British people voted for in 2016 was for us to fling our borders open so far that actually it looks a bit like that OnlyFans account that we were talking about earlier. And they fling it open, and look, it goes up here. You've got over 1% of the entire population coming in as net migration. And what we've imported over the past few years is half the size of the whole of Scotland coming here. That's not sustainable. I don't care if you're the biggest net migration nut on the planet. That ain't sustainable. You're complaining about the fact that the NHS doesn't work? Well, let's look at these stats. You're complaining that there aren't enough houses? Well, let's look at these stats. You're complaining there's not enough places for your kids at school? Well, let's look at these stats. You're complaining that services like your bin collections aren't happening as often? Well, let's look at these stats. All are implicated in this. And Farage actually was the first one to actually say this. He said this in 2015. He raised the alarm and he was laughed at. But I think this explains why Reform are doing so well. Let's just have a little watch and a reminder of what he said in 2015.
We are talking about a market, folks. I know none of you have ever worked in business, but we're talking about a market. And markets are about demand and supply. And I just wonder, I'm curious, could I get any recognition from any of you that the demand side of this equation is that a rapidly rising population due to open-door immigration, started by Ed Miliband's Labour Party in the late 1990s, has directly contributed towards the housing crisis. Is there any flicker of recognition from any of you? Please, one of you, have a go, please.
We have a housing shortage across this country. But you know what, Nigel Farage? It's not caused by immigrants. In your world, every problem is caused by immigrants. We need to build more houses. We have a situation where certainly the Tory plans are, Ed's may be slightly different, but the Tory plans are to spend a fraction building new houses of what is spent every year on housing benefit. It's the shortage of houses that drives up rent. We need to build more houses, substantially more houses.
And migrants need to live somewhere.
For the people who can't buy their own home and need to rent. Now, you know, Nigel, you're obviously on a setting out to win friends and influence people tonight, but if we can get away, in this debate from the idea that every problem...
Blah, blah, blah.
Can I just alert you all to the fact you don't know the questions that are coming. I do, and there is a question coming on immigration. So let's perhaps not go in too much depth on that for the moment.
Just astonishing. I mean, if you cannot accept, if you are not worldly enough to accept there is a demand supply side to this equation, then I'm very sorry.
I want to come back.
I'm very sorry.
I accept demand and supply. I simply don't accept that all of the demand bit of it is down to immigrants.
When the population goes up, when the population goes up, there is more demand for houses. It's not difficult.
Yeah, so that's just one of the issues there that explains, you know, this going up like this. He predicted it. He said it in 2015. You know, that's nearly 10 years ago. Bloody hell, that makes me feel old. And he rang the alarm, and he was laughed at by that BBC audience there, by the politicians on that panel. And he was right. And Alex, I wonder if this is explaining why people are saying, I've had enough of the two main parties. They are two cheeks of the same behind. They have allowed this to happen. This country is going down the shitter, and I need to do something about it. So I'm going to look at alternatives like Reform.
Well, it's pretty obvious. The British public have said this time and time again. We don't want any more immigration, and we're willing for our economy to take a hit as a result of it. I mean, we voted to get to lower migration in multiple elections, electing the Tories, who promised us tens of thousands a year, not almost millions. And then we had the referendum for Brexit, which was a massive sign as well that we wanted to end free movement. And now Reform are about to outpoll the Tories. The interesting thing about that poll, Darren, is that half of it was done before Nigel Farage became leader. So that poll, I can guarantee you, would be even bigger today when there's a fresh poll being done. I can guarantee you the Tories will be behind Reform, because they are the only party, now that we've seen what the Tories are actually capable of under Boris and under everyone else who's let us down, and they have no intention of fixing migration. They've gone, right, well, there's only one alternative here, and that's Reform. And this is why Nigel Farage needed to U-turn on that decision, because without the Tories... He really needed to, because without him, this would be over for another decade. And by that point, it's going to be too late. But now there's a chance that Reform can really finish off the Tory party and make that party and unite the right, essentially, is what I want to see.
And going back to what you said earlier, right, he can highlight, he can also reach out to the TikTok generation, you know, bringing in these young people and influencing them through new ideas and exposing them to ideas they've never heard before, and actually explaining to them how immigration hurts them directly in the pocket, right? There is no evidence actually that a depression on wages is beneficial to working class kids in parts of this country.
Yeah, simple stuff, really, isn't it? As Nigel said, if you can't put the equation together, more immigrants equals more demand, then he can't help you. And this is very simple stuff. Kids can do this on at
Supply
school.
and demand.
You know,
Supply and
supply
demand.
demand. It's the economy, stupid. You know, and we've also figured out that more immigration doesn't lead to higher GDP. It's all been exposed. It's just taken bold people to come out and say it that aren't afraid of being called a racist.
Younes, why do you think Farage is doing so well and about to beat the Tories? And do you predict that he will actually end up getting a higher vote share?
I'm a big fan of Nigel Farage. I supported him during the Brexit, and I always knew that Brexit is going to win. I feel like the silent majority actually agrees with him, even though they don't come out and say it. I actually read this study that said that actually college and high school boys especially, they lean a lot more conservative now, the Gen Z, compared to Gen X and millennials. So you would have, and I think this is a result of just 20, 30 years of just neoliberal brainwashing and wokeism, and they're just having a natural fight back by the younger generation. But back to the point of GDP. On paper, you can say that GDP does increase when you have immigrants, but GDP per capita decreases. And if you want to be a wealthy nation, you need to have a high GDP per capita. I'll give you an example. So China and India are second and third biggest GDPs in the world, respectively. However, the buying power of their citizens is less than half of a British citizen. However, when you look at countries such as Norway and Sweden, their GDP is like 1/10 of the United Kingdom, but their GDP per capita is like twice the size. So you want to be living in societies where people have a lot of money to spend and they have a lot of buying power. So the GDP per capita is actually the analysis you need to look at, that your country is doing well, not your entire GDP.
Well, I mean, even the Bank of England, said that there was no evidence that immigration was having an uptick on everybody's incomes and the GDP and all the rest of it. There is just no evidence that it is doing that. Now,
can I just say one more thing on this, Darren? It's just really briefly. Most people don't mind immigrants coming to this country. 95%, I'd say 95% of people I speak to do not mind people from foreign nations coming here, but they want them to culturally integrate. They want them to adhere to British values. They want them to work and be treated fairly and the same as all of us. None of this, I'm a different skin color to you, so I deserve to have privilege. That is not what Britain is. So if this whole argument wouldn't even exist if there weren't these crazy troglodyte level socialists saying that these people that we bring here not only should be entitled to benefits immediately, but should also get a leg up in work, should get a leg up on the housing ladder, and ghettoize parts of the country. That is the problem here. It's not immigrants, it's the way that they have been integrated to the country. And if we change that, then I can guarantee you most British people wouldn't bat an eyelid.
Yeah. Now, the Independent had a conversation with someone from YouGov, the pollster, and by the way, I absolutely cannot stand the Independent changing their logo to include that new flag thing. I mean, they're supposed to be an independent paper, right? But clearly not if you're dancing with the devil there and having a dalliance with that kind of ideology. But anyway, Nigel Farage could win Reform UK as many as 4 seats at general election, says YouGov. Exclusive, Nigel Farage's decision to stand could see Reform compete for seats in several constituencies, says the pollster, and it has some of these seats set out here. So there's Hereford, there's parts of Wales, there's Somerset, there's Bridgewater, Dorset, the Isle of Wight even, Exmouth.
Oh, Wight, bloody hell.
Spelthorne, there's Bognor Regis, there's Folkestone, there is Spelthorne, there's Hertfordshire, Basildon, which I believe is Ticey standing in Basildon? I can't remember now. Clacton, where of course...
He is, isn't he?
Okay. Clacton, where Farage is standing. West Suffolk, which is, I believe, Matt Hancock, his constituency. Boston and Skegness, and Great Yarmouth, what's that, Ashfield. Oh, Ashfield, that's Lee Anderson, of course, his constituency. And Amber Valley. Now, the ones in the darker yellow are the ones that they're predicted to do very well in. So Boston being one, Clacton doing very well as well. I'd love to see Nigel in Parliament. I really, really would.
Yeah.
I'm probably not supposed to say that, so I hope no one from my employer is watching, but I really would love to see him, because I think he would be a menace to both Labour and the Conservatives, and I mean that as an endearing term of love. I think he would hold their feet to the fire, and he'd be a brilliant parliamentarian, actually, in that chamber. Yeah. Alex?
Well, I was just going to really briefly say what this actually sets up, and I think, look, there's going to be a lot of people in the comments who disagree with me about this, because I do think Nigel's going to win this seat. I think it would be a shocker if he didn't actually at this point in time, considering how many votes he's taking off both Labour and the Tories in that constituency. But what I think this actually sets up is a way for Nigel, as party leader for Reform and in the House of Commons, to start moving the Conservative Party back to where it belongs, in Conservative territory. Now, I would be very surprised if the Tories don't lean on Nigel. He will be the most senior right-wing politician left in the opposition benches when the Tory party gets wiped down to 120 seats or less. He will be de facto leader of the right wing in the House of Commons. It sets the path for Nigel to go back into the Conservative Party, especially while they're going to be in this tumultuous period, as a sitting MP, and then depart Reform and go to the Tories. If that isn't successful, then the Tories will be gone forever. But I think that would be the plan if I was Nigel Farage.
So you think he will cannibalise the Conservatives from within Parliament?
Yes. Yeah, they already love him as it is. Look at all the people that might be keeping their seats. People like Priti Patel, Suella Braverman's doing pretty well in her seat. Those sorts of people will go, let's bring Nigel in. Let's get him in the Conservative Party. And that will change. That will be what wins them back their support in 5 years' time.
Yeah, Younes, do you agree with that?
Yes, and I think, most likely Labour is going to unfortunately win the next general election. However, if Reform does well, and are they available on all the ballots? Like, or they start on certain parts, they're not.
As far as
they are available.
As far as I'm aware, but the deadline is Friday, so yeah.
Yeah, let's hope they are, because I'm definitely voting Reform myself. And as I said this before, I feel like Nigel Farage is going to take a lot of votes away even from Labour, because, as I said, he's the last charismatic leader that can invigorate a new generation. And he might take a lot of votes from Labour, he might take a lot of votes from Conservatives. And in an ideal world, neither party is going to get the majority. And the only way the right can survive this election is that if Reform and the Conservatives can build a coalition together against Labour. It's unlikely. And Conservatives, Rishi Sunak yesterday say, "Oh, if you don't vote for us, it's a vote wasted." I don't agree, because I don't think the Conservatives. Yeah, and the Conservatives are not even right wing anymore. They're centre, and they even pander to the left a little bit more. The only true right wing, or at least centre right wing party left in this country is the Reform Party. And I'm a big fan of Nigel Farage. As I said, I would like to help him, actually. I spoke to Richard Tice the other day on the phone, and I was actually going to stand as an MP for West Ham. However, on Thursday, they said that it's not enough time for the vetting period. So I put my papers forward on Thursday, and I spoke to this gentleman called Roger Gravitt, I think, by Friday, and then he said there's not enough time because the weekend coming and the vetting is, you're supposed to submit the papers by Tuesday. So
that's a shame.
Unfortunately, I missed that opportunity by a day or two, but it doesn't matter. But I've already been in contact with Reform, and as you said, Nigel Farage is really good speaker and he's great on social media.
Oh yeah, he's
so if I
phenomenal.
can meet up with him and maybe they'll do a couple of videos, me and him, I feel like it will really help his campaign. So I mean, if Nigel's watching this, I would really like to.
Yeah. All right, Alex.
Well, I think what's really important is that Reform can make enough leeway into the Tory vote that the Tories can't ignore them, because my concern is that within 4 years' time the Tories will have to start making a comeback, and that's going to be the telling point for them, because if they lower their vote share again but Reform can't break through, there's going to have to be something give. Now, this is the critical point, which is why I think it's so important that Nigel gets elected more than any other MP. I'd love to see Richard in there, I'd love to see Lee Anderson in there as well, and I'd love to see others, but I think it's critical that Nigel gets elected, because he is going to be he's going to be kingmaker for the Tory party if they get him in. I'm not saying he's ever going to be prime minister, because I think that's highly unlikely. But Nigel Farage in the Conservative Party, in a high office position, in a shadow cabinet position, would certainly turn the fortunes of a Conservative Party. That's for sure. And that's the critical thing.
On your point earlier on immigration, I've been neglecting our comments. Deborah says, I'm all for diversity, but where I work, they celebrate the foreign cultures, not ours.
Yes.
We have a majority of foreign workers in the care home I work in. And I think she's responding to what you said, Alex. Do you want to just come back to that?
Yeah, no, I think she's absolutely spot on there. I mean, there's parts, where I was born in London, white people are a minority, and there is no celebration of white culture in that area, or no day of remembering the history of white people and the people that made that area. It's awful. It's genuinely awful, and it's all this pandering. Whilst even though you may be the minority of people, I think someone made a great comment. I think it was one of the American politicos who said that where's the diversity quota for white people in the National Basketball Association? There's 80% of people in the NBA are black, but there's no calls for there to be equality in the NBA because white people aren't as good at it. It's a meritocracy, but we throw that to one side when it comes to white-dominated industries. It's a real shame.
Yeah, it is. Your comments are coming in thick and fast, so thank you for doing that. Wild in the Woods says, I grew up when Tony Blair was in power, really don't want Labour again. Yeah, I think many of you share those sentiments. And Pick and Mix says, Nigel, Richard, Ben, Lee and Anne, if she's still with Reform. She is, as far as I'm aware, rather. I hope they get seats. And Streaky Bacon says, Sunak and Starmer are both globalists. Your comments are coming in so fast that I've just lost that comment. But anyway, right. I want to talk about this. Younes, I want you to respond to this point because I tweeted earlier this week, Nigel Farage gets relentlessly badgered by the BBC for pointing out the obvious, that we've got sizable groups of Muslim voters in Britain who don't speak English, a glaring failure of multiculturalism. I said the smug Liberal London host tries to trip him up by asking if his kids speak any foreign languages. Now, this is irrelevant from the point that he was making because they could speak 40 foreign languages. It doesn't actually diminish the point that he was making. And as far as I'm aware, these are classic deflection tactics. But let's just have a listen to what was said on the BBC's flagship radio politics programme, the Today programme, which is the most depressing show on radio.
I could take you to streets in Oldham right now where no one speaks English.
Or they could be speaking two languages, couldn't they? Don't your children speak another language?
No one speaks English.
Do your children speak another language? How do you know they're not speaking another language?
Because I've been there, and the Guardian have even reported it.
And do you think those people you might hear speaking another language might have no English at all?
Do your
children speak another language?
I wouldn't comment on that.
Okay, but I think they do because I think your wife,
comment
your
on that. I don't talk about my children.
Okay, but
and if you do, I think that's pretty poor form. Very poor
perhaps
form.
we can agree that speaking more than one language is perhaps a good thing.
I could take you to streets in Oldham right now where no one speaks English.
So, Younes, come back to that then and what she said.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't know what her point is. The point is that immigrants are coming to this country and they're not adapting and they're not assimilating. That's the whole point, and they don't celebrate British values and they try to push their Islamic Sharia law nonsense onto everyone else. And that is an existential threat. And Nigel Farage is correct. As much as the BBC wants to vilify him and call him a racist, actually a lot of people have eyes and they can see that he's correct. We have a rise in Islamism in this country. And just a rise in people not wanting to adapt. And look, a thriving country, whatever country you are, you have to be able to keep your culture. When people immigrate here, they have to adapt and assimilate to you. You don't have to adapt and assimilate to them. As I said, I was in Italy recently. And one of the great things about Italy is that Italians have kept their culture. No matter what color you are, whether you're black, white, when you go to Italy, you speak Italian, you dress Italian, you act Italian. And if you step outside of that, they will call you out on it. And as I said, if I'm the president of Iran one day, I'm all for multiculturalism. Okay? I'm all for multiculturalism. But if you come to Iran, Persian culture is supreme. and you have to respect our culture because you're in our country. You go to Dubai, you respect their culture. You go to Qatar, you respect their culture. You go to Saudi Arabia, you respect their culture. Okay? And that's where I stand on it. And Nigel Farage is completely right.
Yeah, Alex, Younes said that beautifully, but I wonder, this is part of a wider media narrative to try and smear Nigel. Do you think they're a bit threatened?
Well, they clearly are. I mean, look, he's going to get millions of votes in this election. Millions. UKIP got 4 million. Let's not forget that. And he's about to probably double it, maybe more. That's a lot of the people in this country all of a sudden going, we've had enough. And if it's doubled since the UKIP election, imagine what it's going to be like again in 10 years. So they're running scared. And they're also running scared that his narrative is pulling through, not just amongst older voters, but amongst younger voters who are going to be the future electorate. I mean, maybe Keir Starmer giving votes at 16, what might end up being a blessing for someone like Nigel Farage, who actually is seeing a surge in popularity amongst young people. So that would be the irony of the century, despite the fact that I disagree with it. But they are running scared, aren't they? And they can't use the same old "you're a racist, you're anti-immigrant" trope, because the evidence is now very clear. And people are seeing it everywhere. And the great thing about TikTok and social media in general is that the government can't control the message like they used to. They can't control the message like they did all the way back in 2010, because now everyone's a journalist.
Yeah. On YouTube, someone says, Younes speaks the truth, good to hear at last, which is very kind. I'm sure you appreciate that, Younes. We've got 6,000 people watching us across platforms again. So thank you very much to everyone that's watching and commenting along. I love all your comments. I'm sorry that I can't respond to all of them, but I am doing my best to keep my beady little eye upon them. This clip yesterday is another example of the media bias against Nigel Farage, and the Sly News, basically they continuously described him as divisive. They basically implied that he had it coming with the milkshake, which could have been, by the way, it could have been an acid attack, right? This could have been absolutely anything. We live in a country in which acid attacks happen on a more frequent basis now, and BBC comedians have made jokes about just that. They've been saying actually that Nigel Farage should have battery acid thrown over him. And I said, I'm telling you now, if it was Sadiq Khan or Diane Abbott that had been milkshaked, the police, well, they were involved, but at that point they weren't. The police would be involved, and Sly News wouldn't dare be making excuses for it, describing her as a divisive person, which she is. She's said some pretty divisive things that have annoyed people like me and many of our viewers, racist things, exactly. And Sly News would not be excusing it if she had a milkshake thrown over her. But let's just have a quick listen, just to give you a flavour of what Sly News was like yesterday in Clacton.
Not the first time that Mr Farage has been attacked when he's been out campaigning. But how did the launch go today?
Well, it was definitely a humbling moment for Nigel Farage, and a good reminder that he is a divisive figure here. Just hours earlier, he was basking in the glow of a rapturous reception here on the seafront behind me. Hundreds of people turned up to greet him. He said he was flattered by the reception that he received from people here. He then went on a walkabout. As is customary with Nigel Farage at Reform UK events, he went to the local Wetherspoons, had a couple of pints, and as he was leaving, someone threw a drink over him, what appeared to be a milkshake. As you said, it's not the first time this has happened to Nigel Farage.
Oh, so that's all right then.
He was also milkshaked back in 2019 ahead of the European elections, you may remember. And as I said, a good reminder that he is a divisive figure here. Despite, all the people in the audience cheering him on, there are also a lot of people who don't like his politics. And there were people here at the event as well who had banners saying no.
I mean, that just sums up, doesn't it, that how much of a challenge he has in the established media. and they're really going after him. And I do you agree with me, Alex, that actually they would never ever say that about any other politician? He had to actually do an interview with ITV yesterday where he expressed how unsafe he feels, and they asked him, do you ever feel that someone could do anything worse than this? And he says, and he said this with absolute clarity and absolute frankness, he said, I try not to think about it. I have to try not to think about it, because when it's Nigel Farage, the police, the media, it doesn't matter. It's Nigel Farage. He's a divisive character. He has it coming. This is damn disgusting, Alex.
Yep, it absolutely is. Darren, I went on GB News earlier today to talk about this topic. Unfortunately, got cut short because of all the legalities surrounding the actual assault she's now been charged with it, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's abhorrent what's happened to Nigel. It's abhorrent because acid attacks are at an all-time high in this country on record. On record. We only saw that poor woman who had acid poured over her, and I think her child, that killer who was on the loose for days, who threw himself in the Thames, the coward who threw him, Azadi, that's right, the coward who threw himself in the Thames in the end. But this is exactly why it's dangerous, and the left sitting there laughing at people like Owen Jones calling it art. Utterly disgraceful people, because if it happened to Diane Abbott, Jess Phillips, Angela Rayner, they would be screaming far right at the top of their lungs, calling for public inquiries, police crackdowns, all this nonsense. This woman would have been hung from the gallows if she had been on the right wing. And this is the world we live in today. We have to be tolerant of it, but they don't. And we live in a time where politicians, I think who was it, the Prime Minister of Austria who was shot? I can't remember which.
It wasn't was it not Latvia? Was it
Latvia?
Like
one of an Eastern European-ish country where the Prime Minister was shot twice in the stomach. We've obviously had Joe Cox here and David Ames, who was stabbed and killed. This is a dangerous time, and what these people are doing is fascism. It's just trying to stop political opponents from going out and getting their message across by using some form of violence, some form of demeaning. That's what it is.
And it's intimidation, Alex. It's to say to people, you've got these opinions. They're popular with the British people. I'm going to shut you up. I'm going to intimidate you. I'm going to silence you.
Correct.
But Younes, you see these same tactics from the Islamists, don't you? They shut you down by saying you're a racist, you're Islamophobic. And it's all part of a tactic, a wider agenda to silence people.
Exactly. And I feel like Nigel Farage is like our Donald Trump. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if someone actually paid her. It could be Sky News, it could be BBC, it could be the establishment. Go and throw this milkshake at him so we can, make him look like a villain. But at the end of the day, you see what happens to Donald Trump. They indicted him. He's a convicted felon now. And all that's done, it's made him more popular. And I feel like stunts like these actually make Nigel Farage more popular because people can see through it. We have the internet now. We have Twitter. We have a open flow of information now. So the mainstream media can't control the narrative like it used to. And she was saying, he was milkshaked in 2019 outside the European Parliament. Yeah, of course he was milkshaked because he won Brexit and the Europeans hate him. So whenever you have a character like that, you best know that the establishment is intimidated from him, and they try to use these tactics to make him look like a fool, but deep down they know he's got the people's hearts and they know that people support him. Same thing with Donald Trump. After his indictment, convicted felon, he's raised close to $200 million just from ordinary people. And when he walked into the MMA, I was watching the MMA live. It was like the biggest cheer I've ever heard. They were cheering more for Trump than they were for the actual fights. And that just shows you where the public are at. And the mainstream media is slowly dying. And I actually feel it's pathetic. It's really is pathetic.
It is, yeah. Darren, who is a super chat, his comment, he says, I don't think it would be too hard to win this election. We are the media, we are the internet and its masters. And I think he is right. I think we underestimate the power and the presence that we have online. And we are there. The People's Army exists. It does exist. And we've got to make our voices heard. I'm just going to read out a few more comments. Wild in the Woods reminds us that there was an acid attack a few months ago. It was bad taste, yes, of course. And a few others, connecting us all together. What a great podcast. Thank you. I appreciate that, Roy. Thank you. Any super chats, we appreciate it because it helps us. Any subscriptions, it really helps us. Get involved. Follow us all on our individual social media channels. Steve says a lefty extremist. Another Steve says the MSM mainstream media are a disgrace. And Tracy reminds us that it was a very dangerous thing. It could have been acid, exactly. It could have been anything. And we need to get around to it. Now, Ben says Owen Jones, who squinnied it to the police because people were calling him names. Well, the police found that he was attacked. But yeah, I imagine he's been to the police a few times. But he was attacked. And he described, that allows me to talk about this. He described... So I got into a Twitter argument with him yesterday because he tweeted this. He said, art. Now, this is a picture of Nigel having the milkshake thrown at him by the OnlyFans woman and him being covered in it, of course. And Owen Jones says, art. So I tweeted him with this. Owen Jones attacked outside London pub. Guardian columnist claims attack was premeditated assault. There he is, looking like a sort of 40-year-old child. And I said, is this also art? I asked him, is this art, him being attacked outside a London pub? And he says, hi, Darren. I was karate kicked to the ground and my head smashed against the pavement by a neo-Nazi who was jailed for nearly 3 years as a result. That is not quite the same thing as being a bit soggy thanks to some banana milkshake. Hope that helps. And I said, no. I said, political violence is political violence, which I genuinely believe, by the way. You do not attack people. You do not try and subvert democracy that way. Yep. I said, so what happened to you in your world is also art. I hope that helps. And of course, I received a torrent of abuse from his Twitter hordes and all the rest of it. But I think I'm absolutely right here. I think actually throwing a milkshake at someone when it could be absolutely anything should be viewed as dangerous and a slippery slope as attacking someone outside of a pub, Alex.
Yep, it should be. I was giving an example of this on GB News today. I said, she seemed like a very gullible young woman. Maybe she's smarter than I'm giving her credit for. But if someone just said to her, look, I've got this cup, it's milkshake. Why don't you go throw that over Nigel Farage? Not only if it was acid, would she end up in jail for a very long period of time, but it would have ruined his life forever. And this is how stupid some people are, because they will fall for that. And these sorts of things can happen very, very quickly from vulnerable and gullible young people. And that's where we see it coming from the most, who are the left, who are, lucky to have a brain cell between them half the time. But this is dangerous. Any form of political violence is dangerous for freedom of speech. It's dangerous for the politicians trying to have their voice being heard. And if you really are an anti-fascist, then you would never dream of trying to shut up your opponents by using some form of violence. In fact, if you think you're an anti-fascist and you agree that throwing milkshakes over people or eggs or anything over a politician to deter them, then maybe you're the fascist.
Yeah, indeed. Tracy asks if the girl has been arrested. Yes, she has. She has been arrested and she has been charged. But Younes, do you think actually the left are showing their hypocrisy by supporting Nigel Farage being milkshaked?
Absolutely. And, there's different stages of trying to silence someone. And again, I'm going to use the Trump example. They try to demean him, like throwing milkshakes at Nigel Farage. Then they will go after you legally, like they did with Nigel Farage as well.
Well, they did that to me as well. They did that to me.
Yeah. And I think it was 6 months ago or a year ago that he was kicked out of his bank. He couldn't hold a bank account. And I was thinking, like, why? Why can't Nigel Farage? So they go after you systematically. They shut you out of the banking system. They try to go after you legally. And, the third and final stage, and I hope this never happens to anyone, such as Nigel Farage or Trump, they will kill you. Same thing that happened with Kennedy. And I feel like the establishment, they say drain the swamp. The establishment is the swamp, and they will do anything in their power to silence their opponents. They will do anything in their power to silence a populist candidate. So, yeah, it is extremely dangerous, and there's levels to this game. It's not just a milkshake incident. This could just escalate with time.
Finally, just to show our viewers the full extent of the media barrage, I've collated a few clips for to get your chops across. And this is Emily Maitlis, formerly of the BBC. She's now gone over to Global, which is a massive news agency, media corporation rather, and they own. It's called News Agents. That's why I said agency, and it's. LBC, it owns LBC, which of course used to be good back in the day. It used to have people like Nigel Farage on it. Even used to have people like Katie Hopkins on, for goodness sake. And let's see what Emily Maitlis had to say for her liberal biased podcast.
So this is the most economically deprived area in England. I know. So this is the most economically deprived area in England.
I know. Thank
Would you
mate.
apologise for what Brexit's done to Clacton?
No, thank you.
Well done, Emily.
Thank you.
What are your priorities? Emily, Nigel's endorsed.
Money. Well, standing up for people is very important, and particularly for small businesses who, sadly. All right, thank you very much.
Just to go back, so
it's got the most inactive.
All right.
What are you going to do to help those who aren't in work?
Brexit has cost every household £2,000. What's your answer to that?
Hello. All right.
Can you answer that, Mr. Farage?
I didn't hear the question.
Brexit has cost every household £2,000.
Oh, put a note on. Put a note on.
Okay, so you don't care.
You're right.
You don't care.
I know.
You don't care that Brexit has made Clacton worse off. Is that what you said?
That's fine.
Is there an apology to the people of Clacton?
Hold on, everybody. Hold on.
I tell you now, the people of Clacton would vote for Brexit again in a heartbeat, right? The people of Clacton recognise that actually, there's a fact here, which is that we voted to take back control. Politicians haven't taken back control in any meaningful way, in any way that's delivered dividends for the British people. But the idea that we are way, way poorer and all the rest of it, this is just, it's complete and utter tosh. And also, though, lockdown made us all a hell of a lot poorer. But to turn around and say that it's down to Brexit, well, why are the Europeans going through the same travails that we are right now? There's just no evidence to suggest that we have been made materially poorer. And even if we had been, you know what? It was quite good to stick two fingers up to elitist media snobs who tried to tell us that we are racist, thick morons and say to them, you want war, we'll give you war. You want us to remain in the EU, we'll give you Brexit. Take that up your pipe and smoke it. I'm sick of these condescending, sneering, liberal talking heads who all sound like each other, who all say exactly the same things, never deviate from the script. I'm to hell with them. So I think Clacton would vote for Brexit again, just to actually stick those two fingers back up at people like Emily Maitlis. I'm damn sick of these people. I absolutely am.
You know what's really funny about that as well, Darren? Rachel Reeves was doing an interview with Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, two of my least favourite people.
Oh, of course.
And of course, they started talking about Brexit and how, Alistair Campbell would chop off his right arm to go back into the European Union. And she said, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, said, I think my constituents, bearing in mind they are a vote leave constituency, I think my constituents would vote for Brexit all over again. And she said it and give her credit where it's due, she didn't lie. She said, we're not going back to freedom of movement. And I think that the Labour Party is starting to realise that if we did have another referendum, they would lose it again. And maybe by a bigger margin, actually. And I think that's what you're going to see over the next 10 years. Yet has Brexit been taken full advantage of? No. Because look who we've had in government for the last few years. Boris was incapable of doing anything about Brexit, mostly because of COVID, where we spent all of our money and we printed millions and millions of pounds, which has caused this inflation crisis today. And then we had Liz Truss for 20 days, who I think might have taken the opportunity better. And then we've had Rishi Sunak, who really is just a corporatist. So, yes, Can we do more? Could we have done more with Brexit? Absolutely. It's going to take 10 years to realise the gains, but we will come out on top.
Yeah. Vampire Girl on YouTube says, God, that woman sounds like a Karen.
Also, she's factually wrong, because as you stated, EU countries are actually doing worse than Britain. And that's why we have, Frexit movement, and Italy wants to leave the European Union, and Spain and Portugal. If you look at it factually, the countries within the European Union are actually doing worse than the United Kingdom. And I feel like one of the reasons was COVID. Another reason is that actually European Union countries have an even bigger problem with immigration. So her claim that people are £2,000 worse off because of Brexit is just nonsense. It really is just nonsense, because the European Union is actually doing worse than us.
Right, I've had you for 1 hour and 25 minutes now, so we're at 6,500 views. So thank you very much. As I say, please do comment along, please do subscribe, please do share, please do support Reasoned, because we can't do anything without you guys. But there is a people's movement starting here. We're seeing the seeds of it, and we want to be part of it. So thank you very much for getting involved. And I want to finish with a funnier one. And again, it's my friends at Sly News. And I said on Twitter, on X rather, I must stop calling it Twitter. Did anyone else miss the warmest May and spring since 1884? Which is apparently what it was this year, by the way, folks. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure over this spring at several points, I actually had the heater on in order to actually avoid being too cold. And anyway, let's have a listen to what Sly News had to say for themselves on this very point.
Just a bit of breaking news we can bring you. Now, you may have thought that it's been a pretty miserable spring and summer so far, but according to the Met Office, the UK had its warmest May and spring in records dating back as far as 1884. So it's been the warmest May and the warmest spring since 1884, according to the Met Office. I guess they're not taking into account the rain.
So even... Just, can anyone remember Brexit 3 years ago, whenever it was? And we had I was out sunbathing in April. Have I been outdoors sunbathing in April and May this year? Absolutely not. This is nonsense. This is because they record all of their temperatures at airports and bloody military sites where it's madness. It's madness.
Devon says it was such a warm May that we had the central heating on all month. Yes, that's a good point. And Mark says, I've got the heating on FFS, it's freezing. And I mean, even the Sly News presenter, which, by the way, Sly News has its own daily climate change show just to really terrify us all into submission and part with the Greta cult and be part of all of that. And she even has a laugh on her face when she says it. They can tell that what they are saying to people is ludicrous. They can hear themselves saying it and think, hang on a minute, it was pissing down, I was cold, I don't recognise any of these stats. So this is clearly a nonsense. Younes, what are they trying to do here? Is this part of a wider agenda to actually scare us? Oh, has Younes disappeared? Yes, he has. Alex,
we might have lost him.
I'll ask you that question.
Yes, well, obviously they are. This is part of their, continuous agenda. We've talked about this earlier on, the sort of the global elite agenda that I said was going on with migration and other things. We know it's obviously happening with climate change because they keep on talking about net zero in every country, left to right in the West. And the only way they feel they can do that, as they have done with their campaigns against Brexit and all these other things, is to try and scare us. Project Fear. We've seen it before. We saw it with Brexit. And that's where their default line is, to scare us into submission, but lie to our faces, as they have done with COVID. Just sorry to end it on such a dull note with COVID, but Anthony Fauci this week has had to go in front of Congress and say, by the way, the rules on social distancing, I made them up.
Tell us who Anthony Fauci was, Alex.
Anthony Fauci was the chief medical officer in the United States who made all of the rules globally for COVID. The rules that he put forward are the rules that we've all followed. And he said masking for children was nonsense. Social distancing was nonsense. We've also found out that the lab in Wuhan, where we are 99% sure that the virus came from, was funded by his department. And look, these are the same people. They're all the same people who told you on Sky News, follow the science, and if you don't believe us, you'll be arrested, or you'll be put away, or you won't be allowed to have your freedom of speech. So if you can believe them on climate change, if you believe them on COVID, you believe them on climate change, then you'll believe them on anything. And that is unfortunately where the left are. You cannot trust these people.
Always Pooh says, Fauci said, I am the science. Which reminds me, actually,
Yes.
I know, Alex, you're a big Star Wars fan, and we didn't talk about Star Wars, so we'll do that next week. But Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine says, I am the Senate. And that's what Fauci reminds me of there, saying, I am the science. But actually, yes, Younes, on that point, though, on Sky News, is this part of a wider... I mean, I don't know who's advising them on all of this. It must be that nutter Jim Dale who appears on GB News every 2 minutes saying, oh, the end is nigh, the end is nigh. This is part of an attempt, is it not, to terrify us into submission on net zero?
Exactly. It's all a globalist conspiracy theory. I feel like there was this guy who was running for president against Clinton, Al Gore. He said
Yes,
something
that's right.
like, by 2013, all the northern ice cubes would have melted, and the sea, and 2013 was 12 years ago. That didn't happen. And look, I studied politics in university, and when I came out of university, I was so brainwashed by this left-wing and environmentalist ideology. And it took me like a few years as I worked in society and I became more and more capitalistic and right-wing. And because you go into the real world and you work and you realize that so many of the things that they teach you are actually wrong. And one thing is that you realize about the climate is that we had an ice age before. There was a time 4,000 years ago that the earth temperatures were like almost 10 degrees warmer. There was a time that, earth was just a molten rock and there was no CO2 emissions. And again, all goes back to control. They try to spread fear through COVID-19, through the environmental hoax, through any other mean, just to be able to impose more control, just to be able to impose electric cars and have everyone have their COVID IDs. So, and it goes, I don't know if you read this book, George Orwell. We are going towards an Orwellian society, a dystopian society where everything is controlled by the central government, and they use these things as a token of fear to be able to impose control.
And it's going to get 10 times worse under Sir Keir Starmer. That's why we need to unite the right. We need to stand against all of these ideas because this is what's coming down the tracks, folks, thick and fast, thick and fast. So one of the YouTubers asks people to click the like button. Raziel says, hit the thumbs up, people. Give us a like. Yes, please do. Give us a like, share, subscribe. Because it's what keeps us ticking along and it allows more of us to actually unite. But we're going to end it there because I've kept these guys for an hour and a half and they do have lives, unlike little old me. And I want to thank you, Alex Armstrong, and of course Younes there as well, Younes Sadaghiani, and which you can follow him on Instagram. Younes is on Instagram. Is your handle Younes Rocks on Instagram?
Yeah, YOUNESSROCKS. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Alex is on Twitter and all these other things, posting pictures of himself.
Yeah, you can see my selfies. No, I don't do that, I promise. Alex H. Armstrong, Instagram and X. Yeah.
And you already know where I am, folks.
Yeah.
They can't get rid of me. But anyway, thank you so much, folks, for watching. And I hope you have a lovely night. And we'll see you same time next week, Wednesday, about 7 p.m. I always say 7 p.m. But as one of the first comments that started us off said, Darren, you're always late. What can I say? Night, folks.
Bye.